Title: The Epicenter, Annapolis and the American Reckoning with Housing, Race, and History. Introduction: The quiet epicenter of America's housing crisis. On the surface, Annapolis, Maryland, capital of the wealthiest state in America by median income, appears to be the picture of patriotic civility. Tourists arrive by the thousands to stroll brick sidewalks, tour the Naval Academy, and admire schooners floating in the harbor. But just a few blocks inland, the picture changes dramatically. In a city of roughly 40,000, nearly one-third of all rental units are subsidized by the government. In percentage terms, Annapolis has a higher concentration of public housing than East Harlem, Brownsville, or South Chicago. Quietly, almost invisibly, it has become the epicenter of one of the most unsustainable and unspoken housing dynamics in modern America. As you move outward to the Eastern Shore and South County, Virginia, you begin to see the shadows of the past materialize in barns built for tobacco drying, remnants of enslaved labor, and plantation homes still standing. These buildings are not just relics, they are markers, waypoints in a racial and economic continuum that stretches from the transatlantic slave trade to Section 8 housing. The ghosts have not left. They've just been pushed into subsidized apartment complexes governed by the Housing Authority of the City of Annapolis, HACA. Chapter 1. Where the tour ends. The geographic layout of Annapolis is at odds with the image it projects. Harbor House, Robinwood, and Eastport Terrace are not hidden in some neglected corner, they are placed directly within walking distance of waterfront properties, luxury shops, and the halls of power. This proximity produces friction. Unlike many American cities where income and racial segregation are mapped into separate zones, Annapolis has compressed its contrasts. Studies from the Urban Institute show that high-density subsidized housing situated next to affluent communities often leads to social isolation and elevated policing of low-income residents. Complaints from homeowners and businesses about quality of life issues frequently result in heavier law enforcement surveillance of public housing residents. But this friction is more than legal or spatial. It is deeply emotional. The subsidized renters and their neighbors do not just live differently. They often regard each other with suspicion and resentment. This collision of lived realities sets Annapolis apart. In many ways, the city is both a microcosm of America's class divisions and a magnifying glass revealing what happens when those divisions are forced into daily contact without a shared social contract. Chapter 2. Historical Foundations and Psychological Fallout. Annapolis's relationship to slavery is not a footnote, it is a foundation. As early as the 18th century, the city served as a significant port in the transatlantic slave trade. Enslaved Africans were brought through the very harbor that now hosts boat shows and high-end crab houses. Institutions such as St. John's College and the Maryland State House were built, directly or indirectly, with slave labor. After emancipation, Black Annapolitans faced systemic exclusion from property ownership, education, and voting. Maryland was one of the last states to abolish slavery, and the state government repeatedly resisted Reconstruction policies. Into the 20th century, Black neighborhoods were destroyed for highway projects, and restrictive covenants prohibited home sales to African Americans. Generational trauma, as documented in the works of scholars like Dr. Joy DeGruy and Dr. Mindy Fulilovi, shows that systemic oppression has long-term psychological effects, including diminished trust in institutions, heightened stress, and disinvestment in civic life. The legacy of slavery is not a historical event, but a present condition embedded in public policy and urban design. Chapter 3. From tobacco fields to subsidized apartments. The visual markers of slavery are still present in the region. Tobacco barns, built specifically for drying crops picked by enslaved laborers, line the roads from Annapolis into the Eastern Shore. Many of these farms transitioned to other industries, but the labor system they relied on left a lasting imprint. Following the collapse of the tobacco economy in the mid-20th century, entire communities, particularly Black communities, were left without sustainable employment. The federal government's response included the expansion of public housing under the 1937 Housing Act, and later, the Section 8 voucher system in the 1970s. However, these solutions rarely included economic opportunity, infrastructure investment, or wealth-building tools. According to a 2018 study by the Brookings Institution, the median net worth of white households in the U.S. is nearly 10 times greater than that of Black households. This disparity is even more acute in cities like Annapolis, where the economy has bifurcated into high-paying federal jobs and low-wage service work. Public housing developments became not just a place to live, but a holding pen, one that offered shelter, but few means of escape. Chapter 4. The Mental Geography of Ownership. The psychological effects of homeownership versus long-term renting are well documented. A 2013 study by the Joint Center for Housing Studies at Harvard found that homeowners report greater life satisfaction, neighborhood attachment, and civic engagement than renters. This difference is not simply economic, it's existential. In Annapolis, this divide is especially sharp. Homeowners live with a sense of permanence. Renters live with the threat of displacement. Homeowners accumulate equity. Renters accumulate regulations. The housing authority imposes strict rules that often limit personal agency: who can visit, how long they can stay, and what modifications can be made to the home. This regulatory environment, designed to prevent fraud and maintain order, often feels punitive. In effect, it removes from public housing residents the dignity of making decisions about their own space. As a result, community investment weakens, and resentment festers, not just toward city officials, but toward the very idea of home. Chapter 5. From Section 8 to Privatized Housing, the Transition Gap. Transitioning from Section 8 housing to privatized homeownership presents both potential gains and significant risks. On the positive side, families who move out of subsidized housing into market-rate ownership can begin to build equity, gain autonomy, and experience a new level of civic engagement. A 2021 study by the Urban Institute found that low-income homeowners reported better health outcomes, increased educational attainment for children, and a stronger sense of neighborhood belonging. However, the transition is fraught. Many Section 8 recipients are rent-burdened even with subsidies, and do not possess the savings or credit history necessary for homeownership. Additionally, the move to private housing removes them from the regulatory protections, such as eviction prevention programs, found in public housing. Here, two underutilized federal-state hybrid programs come into focus. The Weatherization Assistance Program, WAP, and Maryland Energy Assistance Program, MEAP, offer subsidies and infrastructure upgrades to reduce utility bills. When deployed effectively, these programs can be game-changers for families transitioning into market-rate homes. WAP, administered by the U.S. Department of Energy, funds insulation, HVAC upgrades, and other improvements that directly reduce monthly costs, a key factor in post-transition stability. According to the National Association for State Community Services Programs, NASCSP, households receiving weatherization assistance save an average of $283 annually on energy bills, a meaningful reduction for households on the margin. MEAP complements this by offering bill payment assistance during peak heating and cooling seasons. If expanded and integrated into housing transition programs, WAP and MEAP could provide critical buffers, particularly for families historically marginalized since Reconstruction. However, these programs are underfunded and inconsistently applied across states. The challenge is not just designing good policy, it's aligning programs, funding, and implementation in a coherent, accessible way for low-income families seeking to exit dependency without stepping into precarity. Chapter 6. Resistance and the Cost of Inaction. Inaction comes at a cost, not just to residents of public housing, but to the city as a whole. Annapolis risks becoming a city defined by division, where community is a veneer and shared experience is replaced by cohabitated suspicion. Local resistance often comes from homeowner associations, city council members aligned with development interests, or law enforcement agencies wary of policy change. Yet, in cities like Minneapolis and Boston, coalitions of activists, housing experts, and even business leaders have begun to rethink the relationship between land, labor, and legacy. If Annapolis fails to act, it may see further erosion of trust in public institutions, increased polarization, and a rising tide of hopelessness that will inevitably spill beyond the confines of subsidized neighborhoods. Conclusion: a reckoning deferred is a reckoning multiplied. Annapolis stands at a crossroads. One path preserves a status quo built on layered exclusions. The other demands reckoning with history, policy, and power. Only by acknowledging the foundation, slavery, segregation, and systemic denial, can we begin to build something equitable. This city, with its tobacco barns and harbor ships, with its row houses and historic plaques, is a living archive. But archives are not meant to be static. They are meant to inform action. The question now is not whether Annapolis will change, but whether it will change itself, or be changed by the very forces it seeks to ignore. Sources cited. 1. U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, HUD, Section 8, Program Data. 2. Annapolis Comprehensive Plan, 2024 edition. 3. NYU Furman Center, State of New York City's Housing and Neighborhoods Report, 2024. 4. Fuli Lovi, Mindy Thompson, Root Shock, How Tearing Up City Neighborhoods Hurts America, and What We Can Do About It. New Village Press, 2005. 5. Maryland State Archives, Historical Data on Slavery and Land Ownership. 6. Urban Institute, The Geography of Opportunity, 2021. 7. Brookings Institution, The Racial Wealth Gap, 2018. 8. Joint Center for Housing Studies of Harvard University, The State of the Nation's Housing, 2013. 9. Kirwan Commission Final Report, Maryland General Assembly, 2020. 10. National Association for State Community Services Programs, NASCS-P-EPS-P, Weatherization Assistance Program 2022 Annual Report. 11. Maryland Department of Human Services, Maryland Energy Assistance Program Overview, 2023.